Welcome to my latest landscape photography guide here in Tasmania. So I'm going to take you somewhere I haven't been before with you guys. I've been down here plenty of times myself though, but I thought I'd share part of Tasmania's east coast with you. Generally, I spend most of my time up in the highlands, down in some canyons, along the rivers and all the waterfalls during the colder months, because it's nice and green, plenty of water around, makes the rivers look amazing. But it's just coming into summer, which you wouldn't think, looking outside at the stormy weather at the moment. I'm not sure how it's going to pan out today. It's supposed to stop raining about 8 a.m, 9 a.m. So I'm going to head down to a place called Freycinet to begin with, Freycinet National Park, or Wineglass Bay as some people know about it. I'm going to try and shoot a scene known as what's called the hazards, and there are a bunch of mountains which poke up out of the ocean, literally, out on a little peninsula, so I'm going to have a look at that. I'm not going to race my way down there, I'm just going to check out the landscape on the way down to Freycinet. There's a lot of beautiful rural settings through here, especially coming into summer. It's quite green still, so maybe try and find a composition with a nice old ancient gum tree and a paddock. Might look quite cool, or if I don't get that, I'll just spend a bit of time just combing the beaches and look for some interesting rock formations as well. So probably another 45 minutes to an hour away from the peninsula, and hopefully I'll beat this weather and get a nice sunrise, well, a late sunrise peeling over the back of the hazard. So let's take a look and stay tuned. Just made my first stop on the way to the east coast. It's quite humid this morning coming into summer, which means there's a lot of blow off or a lot of steam rising out of the forest, which is pretty cool, which you'll see in a moment. I've just spotted this gum tree off the side of the road, so I've just pulled over and I'm just going to try and take a sneaky little photo on the way down to the east coast. I'm not going to worry about a tripod or anything. It's just an ad hoc kind of a picture, so if it looks that amazing, I'll run back and get my tripod. So I've just put my 85mm Zeiss lens on here just to shoot across this field and try and isolate this gum tree, which is probably 200 meters off into the distance. And I'll just take a little frame here without getting too wet. So I've got my camera on f11 and I'll shoot this at about 1/25 of a second and see how that looks. And that's way too dark. So I'll put it back down to f8 at a 60th of a second. And I just need to get down a little bit closer. And the trick is not to get wet feet here in the ditch. And I'm really not sure it's that fantastic, but I had to stop and have a look, just feel the impulse. But I still think that tree is probably just a little bit too far away, even for the 85mm prime. So I think from now I'll just keep journeying on, and like I said, try and get some steam or some clouds rising off the top of the hazards for a pretty cool photo down at Freycinet. So let's go have a look. So I've just arrived in the little town of Coles Bay down here on the east coast of Tasmania. The weather is quite frigid, the breeze is very cold. It's not what I expected. I was expecting glassy smooth water perhaps and a little less wind, but I'm certainly getting some mood across the hazards here, these three little mountains that you're about to see. Where I am is a fairly common spot for landscape photography. It's just off the side of the road. It's pretty easy to get here. So I'm just going to walk my way around the foreshore here just a little bit and go to a spot to have been before without falling over into a crack here. And the thing that I love about this spot is the rocks around here have this beautiful orangey red algae across them, which can make a striking foreground. And the other thing that I'm going to be looking for is perhaps a nice rock pool to give myself a little bit more interest in the foreground as well. So just going to come around the other side of this she oak tree here and have a look. So I've just taken a couple of images down here at the foreshore, and I'm not in a very good spot here. I'm actually getting quite wet. The tide is definitely on the approach as the wind's starting to kick up, and my feet and my legs are quite wet, but thankfully my camera's still quite dry. I think I've got about 15 minutes left with good usable light here at the moment. I've noticed the weather is tracking over from the west, and I think that it's going to be quite a nice bright blue day down here. The clouds at the moment are quite gnarly. The mood itself is, I'd say it's fairly flat as far as photography goes. But I'm thinking I might do a really long exposure with my 6-stop neutral density filter and try and put a bit of motion blur in this water. Might just experiment a little bit, take that off, try a few different settings, and hopefully end up with a good image. So I'm here, I'm doing it, and the LCD screen does look quite nice, which I'll give you a little look and give you an idea of what I'm shooting. So I have just taken a few exposures. I think I've got a fairly good panorama, which I'm going to stick together in post-production. Like I said, the mood is probably a little bit flat for my liking, but I think the fact that I'm out there and I'm still taking some nice images has made my day. I'm just going to have a bit of a poke around these rock formations around here and see if I can find another composition, if not a better composition. My feeling is those really gnarly clouds which make this image at the moment are going to disappear with the changing weather from the west to soon come over this part of Tasmania. So I'll just jump over these next few beautiful coloured rocks down here at Freycinet Park, well, on the fringe of the park here, and see if I can find another spot. And I'm going to turn this camera off because I really need to concentrate so I don't fall over and hurt myself here. So I have decided to finally pack up, and I just don't think much is going to change here for the next few hours at least, possibly the rest of the day if it does clear over. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to head back up the hill to the car, and I am going to go into Coles Bay, and there is a little coffee shop in there, get myself a nice warm brew, and then going to head over the other side of the peninsula to the beaches. And like I said a little bit earlier on, it's probably, or maybe I didn't say, but I'm going to head over to one of my favourite beaches in the whole world, in the Freycinet National Park. Not only just for photography, but I'm hoping to catch a bit of a wave there as well, as I brought my surfboard down. So coffee now, and beaches shortly after. Stay tuned. So I've just come over to the eastern side of Freycinet and I'm just heading up to this pretty cool lighthouse up here. I've never really shot any pictures looking out over here. I've just never been to this particular point at the right time of day, or the right time of day when the light's been amazing, so I've never really succeeded here, but I'm just going to give you guys a bit of a look at what you can expect if you come around to this part of the Cape here in Freycinet. And it is quite spectacular just looking straight out into the ocean here. And I'll just take a mental note. I think looking back there towards the southwest is a cracking spot for a photo, which is the entry point for Wineglass Bay. But like I said, not today. So surprisingly, I have just taken a pretty cool image looking out here. I'm looking due southeast at the moment, and there's a bit of a cape down in the distance. I've just used a B camera here. The Nikon that I regularly use doesn't quite have the throw on the lenses, so I've just enlisted this other small camera just for the job, so I can zoom right in. I've done a 3-image stitch. I'm really impressed with the clouds out the back there across the horizon. I think they're quite broody, and all I'm doing is this 3-stitch image. I'm just going to basically put the horizon in and just blend it straight in over to where the start of the Cape is over here. And I think it's just going to make a really nice timeless image with just a little bit of landmass in the picture, and it's all about the ocean and the sky, as you can see here. Coffee and cake, how good's this? So I've just had my coffee and cake, and I've come out to one of my favourite beaches in Australia. It really is spectacular down here. It's Friendly Beaches in the Freycinet National Park. I'm just going to spend a bit of time walking up the beach and look for some interesting compositions. What I'm looking for is either some interesting shaped seaweed that's been washed up maybe. We get a little bit of bull kelp down here in Tasmania, which makes quite beautiful pictures in the foreground. I'm also thinking I'm going to look for some interesting rock formations. There's a couple of rock shelves around here, up around the corner, depending on how well exposed the beach is at the moment. But this sky in the background along the horizon is quite beautiful, which makes good time exposures out here. It's very overcast, a lot of texture in the sky, and I think I've probably got at least another hour before that sun even thinks about showing itself out. So stay tuned and let's have a look up around the corner here and try and bag a good shot. I've just set myself up on this little rock shelf, getting splashed by waves, as you can see them lapping over this little shelf here. What's really drawn my attention to this spot are these rocks that make their way out into the ocean at the edge of this shelf here. And what I'm going to do is probably put about a 1 or 2 second time exposure into this as the water is dispersing itself across this shelf and then back into this little rip back out into the ocean. The cloud behind me or in front of me is still quite amazing, and I really do think I'm going to get a strong composition just with these really amazing rocks in the foreground. And the thing that really helps boost these rocks as well that caught my attention is the green lichen that's growing all over it as well. So fingers crossed I'll get a good exposure. I think it's just going to be a bit of practice with how long the right exposure is. And also I'm going to have to employ the same sort of methodology as a waterfall, because if I put too much water in this exposure like this, I'm going to end up with a big smear of white right through the foreground, and the image is going to lose its impact against the black rocks here as well. So I'm thinking, like I said, maybe 1 to 2 seconds on a smaller wave. So it's time to take that shot. So I've actually got quite wet on those last few exposures waiting for the camera to lapse over, and I think it's worth it. I had to put a little bit more time exposure in than I anticipated. I got up to around 15 seconds on a few exposures. With the smaller exposure, there just wasn't enough contrast with the broken waves against the deeper rock pools. The ocean at the moment this time of year is a beautiful turquoise colour, and when the time exposure was too short, there wasn't enough contrast against that beautiful coloured water. And by lengthening that exposure, I've got a beautiful white streaky contrast in the foreground and that incredible sky behind me. And I think I'm just about done taking photos for the morning, and I think it's time to go for a surf. So it's time to suit up and embrace that cold Tasmanian water.